Hi, and welcome to Omec. I'm Jacob Lundvall, and in this episode, we're talking to Yoni Heilbronn, a former intelligence officer turned tech leader and investor. We'll talk about Israel before and after October 7th, what makes Israeli founders unique, and where the future of tech is headed in a nation under pressure. Let's dive in. Yoni, you started your career in the army, in the intelligence unit Shmonematayim, 8200. Can you take me back and tell me that story?
Sure. I was a very young kid, 17 and a half post high school. Started with half a year of training from morning till midnight, studying what it means to be an intelligence officer. Then I got enlisted, and then started a journey of actually 8 years in which I was an intelligence officer at 8200 Shmonematayim. In many ways, this is an experience that shaped my entire adult life, as my friends, my network, my technological background, how to manage people, in a sense, how to be an entrepreneur. These are things that I've learned during my army time. So for me, again, it was a great experience, working with great people, accomplishing things that some people didn't do before me. But again, you're never told that. You're just advised. You're not necessarily ordered. You're advised to just do it, as they say. And in many ways, the skies are the limit. It's my service in 8200 was an intersection between technology and intelligence, and it was a great experience dealing with cutting edge technologies on one hand, dealing with sometimes life or death situations in which I was literally involved. Gives you a lot of satisfaction, gives you a lot of maturity at a very young age. You do things that people in other places in the world just don't do. And you also learn how to lead people, how to manage, how to deal with difficult situation, how to function under duress or stress. And I'm very thankful. For me, it was a very meaningful service. And again, in many ways, it shaped my adult life. No other way of saying that, basically.
Shmonematayim has a lot of incredible talent coming out of that unit, and that goes straight into the tech sector. Just like people like you, what is it about that unit that creates entrepreneurs and tech leaders?
In many ways, I think that there is kind of a motto. It's an unofficial motto that impossible is irrelevant. You're really encouraged to speak out your mind. Again, rank is not necessarily an issue in Shmonematayim on 8200. Even a private is allowed to speak out his mind to the commanding general of the unit. And it's a mixture of a lot of good people, talented people that come and serve. They're not ordered necessarily to do things. They understand the importance of what they're doing. So there is no need to persuade them or give them real orders. They just do things because they understand the importance, and they like sometimes it's kind of a challenge from an intellectual point of view to do some things that have never been done before, or support a lot of operations, very interesting things that are going on behind the scenes, and you're taking part in that, and you're actually influencing, and it matters. You understand that what you do actually matters to the national security of the country. So it's sense of, I don't know, recognition, understanding that what you do is important, and you have this all across the board. And this is, in the end, this is very significant. It gives you a sense of purpose, and and it's fun working with people, with the same attitude. So Shmonematayim is like, in a sense, the Israeli Air Force is considered as something which is very different than most of the Israeli military, and at least 8200 in my time, and I would assume that it is the same thing today is an island of excellence, or whatever you call it, that is, I would say, revolving on its own, I would say, motivation and great people that are there. So for me, it was, again, a great experience.
After your career in the army, you went into the tech sector. Why did you make that shift, and how was that transition?
At a certain point in time, I thought that I'm going to academia, but then I understood in the middle of my studies, again after completing my bachelor's degree, or I was already in the middle of my master's degree, that academia was not really for me. I needed something more actionable, which was maybe a bit similar to what my experience was in the military service. So I understood that the business world was much more relevant for me. I wanted to do things that I could actually see the immediate results or the immediate effects to what I was doing. So I started my career in a company called Nice System. It's one of the biggest high-tech companies in Israel. I started as a product manager. Then I moved to marketing and business development. These were the first 5 years of my career, and it was really a great school to attend. Much of the things that I know about business and how to conduct significant business in large scale comes from my early experience at NICE, which was really at a great school from my perspective.
In the middle of your tech career, you got an offer to go work for the Prime Minister's office.
Mhm.
How did your day-to-day change?
Well, again, it was in the middle of my career in tech. I was called back to serve, as they say, for king and country, for a certain project, which was very, very, very both interesting and really, I would say, giving back to the country, which I do love. So my day-to-day change from, normal high tech, normal, travel, business meetings, to things that are quite different in a sense, relying on my both business and I would say intelligence acumen. And it was a very interesting time. But again, obviously, after spending add my service in the Prime Minister's office to my military service. So after more than a decade in direct service of the country, I thought that it was enough for me to do something directly, and I wanted to go back to the industry and be involved in let's say the normal course of things in high tech. But the things that I had the privilege of dealing with were really the most interesting ones that one could aspire to be involved in, really contributing to the national security of the country, and gave me a lot of pride and sense of purpose. Again, I was doing many different things. Obviously, I cannot go into the details, but it was a great experience from my point of view.
Without sharing too much details about the work you did, what were some of the biggest lessons you took away from your service in the army, from the Prime Minister's office, and from your early tech career?
Basically, I think that also in later stages of my career, I learned to understand that, as I mentioned earlier, impossible is irrelevant, and I also saw a lot of great people that I had the pleasure of working with. But in the end, you do understand that people are sometimes their own worst enemies. They put shackles on themselves, they don't necessarily believe in themselves, or they always ask for permission from their bosses or from whomever. And admittedly, again, also from my point of view, it took me quite a while to really believe in my abilities. Again, I had a great career, but I still had some internal doubts, and it took me a while to get to a point in which I understood that things could be done, not taking a risk. Maybe this is the biggest, I would say, takeaway. Let's say in retrospect, that not taking a risk is taking a risk. just being plain on conservative. Again, this is for me. Again, there are people that should potentially stay where they are, have their normal course of career, not like the one that I had, which was quite jumpy and quite not say the regular course of things, as they say. But that's me. But I do believe that especially today, and in today's very turbulent world, and I think that the lesson of or the notion of taking a risk is a must. People should not stay complacent in where it's necessarily easy or not challenging. I do advise people to take risks because things change, and things change dramatically today. And what's right today will not be the same thing in 2-3 years. Especially if you think of the age of AI, things are happening very, very rapidly. And what's right today will or certainly not be the same thing in a year from now. So this is my key takeaway. Don't hesitate as much as you can, and don't be afraid to take risks, because otherwise you stay behind. This is my own personal belief, at least.
One of the companies you joined later was Argus, which also did a major exit. What was it that drew you to the company, and did you know that they were going to do as well as they did?
Actually, I did. Again, Argus is a very interesting story. I got to know one of my partners, Offer, CEO of the company, when he was a team leader at 8200 at 8200, and I was working with him via the Prime Minister's office. This is how we got to know each other. I was, in a sense, his nagging customer. This is how we got to know each other. Then, okay, we were not in contact for quite some time, quite a lot of time and years. And then one day he just sent me a message in LinkedIn, and we sat for coffee, and that's all she wrote, as they say. And August was a very, very interesting experience, also life-changing from my perspective. This is where literally, as they say, my chakra opened. And I really, after a few days, after starting with a company, I understood that really the impossible is irrelevant. And this is the company that invented the cybersecurity market for the automotive world. And to me, it made a lot of sense. You know, we have cars, they are connected to the internet, you have people inside, it's a risk. But back then in 2014, it was something which was novel. Nobody thought of that. In the early days, customers were looking at me as if I was half mad. Why do we need this? But to me, it made a lot of sense. So it was quite an interesting experience to create literally a market globally, educate customers, raise significant amounts of capital from both very prominent local investors and very prominent global investors. And along the way, I had some quite interesting experiences that had you told me that these are the things that I'm going to do, I would have probably thought that you were half mad, let's say 12, 13 years ago. But in the end, it actually happened. So I can't argue with that. And to me, it was a huge stepping stone that that really took my career to another league. No other way of saying that.
Being so early in a new market, having to convince customers of something they're barely familiar with and let alone don't think they need, how do you sell something like that?
So in the beginning, we were the first ones in the world to actually show how a car could be hacked remotely. We had a very interesting piece at Forbes. This gained a lot of attention to the company. And again, it's also in face-to-face meeting with customers, trying to explain. Then there was a very significant, I would say, a cataclysmic event in the industry. It was almost a decade ago in July 2015, a couple of hackers did a copycat to what we did that was published in Forbes, and they hacked a Cherokee Jeep, and this was published in Wire magazine, publicized all over the US. This created a recall of 1.4 million vehicles, damages of more than $1 billion. This caused a lot of noise, I would say, in the industry. And in the end, it caused me to, a few months after that, to testify in Congress on automotive cybersecurity as an expert witness. Quite an interesting experience that I would have never imagined would happen to me. So beyond this very important experience, I also understood that if we're talking about how to create demand and how to create a market, I understood that I had very difficult customers at that time, the automotive industry. They preferred to turn a blind eye or just, let's say, eyes wide shut. We would rather not know that we have a problem. So I understood actually during that hearing in Congress that okay, I have very difficult customers that it would necessitate to potentially have either legislation or regulation or both to actually make them buy what was trivial to me and much more economical, but still, it took me time to understand that this would be a potential way to do things, and this is what I did in the end. And I started traveling to DC, meeting congressmen, senators, their legislative aides, staffers, to influence them. Kind of a one-man show of the lobby, which in the end was successful to my luck. Again, it was hopefully mostly luck, I guess. In the end, the company was acquired for a very significant amount.
All of this amazing experience leads us to your new season, where you have come together with some of your partners to start something called IL Ventures. Tell me about that and tell me how it started.
So after I left Argus after 5.5 years post the integration of the company, and then I paid my dues for 2 years post the acquisition of Argus, I came I started thinking, again, these were a few months prior to COVID, during meetings in weekends with my best friend and now partner as well. We were starting to think, okay, we would really like to do something together again. My partner, whose name is Elad Frankel, he's also my best friend since first grade. So it's actually 42 years and counting. We also served together in the military, so we go a very long way back. We work together at night, so today it's actually the fourth time doing something together. So during our weekend meetings, chats, both of us came to the conclusion that we want to come back and work together. And we wanted to do something significant, which would use our own experience. Elad, again, a long time ago, he was an investor in Elron, Israel's first VC. Then for more than a decade, he was a CEO of a company. And again, he sold this company. So both of us exited. And both of us saw an interesting niche that seemed to us very relevant. This was, again, prior to COVID. And I'm talking about bringing disruptive technologies to legacy or traditional industries. And we saw both the great opportunity as there is a lot of relevant deal flow here in Israel in areas like smart manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, energy, robotics, AI, a better food tech. These are the areas in which we are focusing on. Great companies in early stages that already have product market fit and revenue with very modest valuations. And we saw an opportunity here. And we started talking, and in the end, again, he exited as well. And we ended up founding IL Ventures, again, quite indicative. So we're focusing mainly on companies here in Israel that offer these kind of technologies, in a sense, call it high tech to low tech. These are the companies in which we invest that help multinational industrial players do the next thing, as they say, be much more efficient, scalable, undergo digital transformation. And if you think of the global perspective, if you take 30,000 feet, look what's happening in the last few years. You had COVID that pretty much broke the supply chain globally. Then you had, or still have, the war in the Ukraine for the last 3 years, which influenced the global supply chain significantly. Then you have the conflict here in the Middle East with the Houthis in Yemen, which really disrupted the global shipping lanes, which means, again, logistics and supply chain. And you have been having the tariff wars. And in the end, from a world of globalization, you go backwards to deglobalization. Add to that the fragility of the supply chain globally, and you understand that the themes in which we decided to focus on are very, very relevant, as in the end, global multinational, mainly industrial players, are basically onshoring what they used to do for 40, 50 years, offshoring, mainly to the East, is coming back home. And once you do that, you have the original problem that caused offshoring, which was costs. Costs are higher. How do you offset that? Disruptive technologies. So it in a sense, it plays perfectly with the theme of my fund. Plus, both my partner and myself were operators. In Israel, you don't have a lot of operator-oriented funds, and the fields in which we invest do require, call it heavy lifting, whatever you call it. And we are highly interested in being involved in the companies in which we invest. This is our value add. We enjoy that, help them scale up. Again, I'm not betting on the technology. I'm never a first investor in a company. I only invest after there's a product market fit. And from our point of view, this is really fun. And again, we're invested in diverse companies. Half of our companies, and we lead seed rounds, already passed the A round stages. So things are looking up quite, I think, nicely from our point of view.
How do you pick the companies you invest in? And you and your partner, as operators yourself, how do you work with the founders? What does your day-to-day look like?
So from my point of view, I'm not there for attending board meetings once a quarter and eating the pastries. That's really not for me. I'm in touch literally on a daily basis with founders and the rest of the management teams on pretty much everything. First of all, if you think of the selection criteria, I need to have founders that are receptive to a relatively quite active approach. In a sense, you could call it kind of a mini private equity approach, because we're very much involved in the company. So I want to be their first founders go-to when it comes to anything that is related to managing the company, from recruiting people to sales, marketing, business model, intellectual property, R&D, product, because I've been there, done that. I'm here to help and provide advice, and have really an informal relationship, and to be the one that they trust, would help them with, or provide them with good advice on how to do things, and how to, in the end, how to speed up their product offering or how they conduct business. This is why I'm there. So they need to be receptive. Obviously, these companies have to have, as I mentioned earlier, a basic product market fit. There should be at least a few customers that I can talk to while I conduct the due diligence and understand how a customer sees the value of the product. This, to me, as an operator, is highly important, because, again, in a sense, I've been on the other side of the table, raising capital from VCs and strategics and all of that. In a sense, I like to call it, don't bullshit the bullshitter. Been there, done that. So it begins again on the day that we screen companies, and we've screened about 150 to 200 companies a year. But the actual work really begins once you have completed the investment on a daily basis. Help them bring business, connect them to customers, help them recruit people, help them shape business models, partnerships. Been there, done that, and this is what makes me tick, and my partner. This is what makes both of us tick, in a sense.
Tell me about one of the companies you've invested in, and what was the moment that made you go, I think this is a real winner?
So the first company actually that comes to mind is Kapow. Kapow is short for Capacitive Power. It's a company which is based in the south of Israel, in Beersheba. Kapow developed a unique technology for wirelessly transmitting energy in high capacity. And the target market is robots in logistics centers, in fulfillment centers, basically negating the need to have batteries in these robots that go, on the floors, on the shelves, things like that. This is something which is quite dramatic with very significant tier one customers globally. The company recently completed a very significant $15.5 million round, which was led by Toyota Ventures. Quite, I would say, a vote of confidence in Israeli deep tech. Again, in a sense, my fund is a deep tech fund. And what Kapow is doing is mostly hardware related. So it's really deep tech, but it's very, very practical deep tech. It's not, I don't invest as a venture capital in things that would take a decade or so to mature. No, I'm investing in things that are very practical and have business from day one. So Kapow is absolutely that, selling already to tier one customers. Plus, it's a great story of great entrepreneurs. Again, 3 PhDs from the Ben Gurion University. The most senior one and the CEO, his name is Professor Mor Peretz. He's the CEO of the company. The other two founders were PhD students of his, and they pretty much bootstrapped the company a few years ago, which also makes me admire them. They raised very small amount from one angel, and the rest is really bootstrapped. And from my point of view, this is a company which is doing really phenomenally. It's not by chance that Toyota Ventures led the round in the company, and I really expect this company to be a very significant company. This is also an award-winning company, very strong intellectual property. They created a category that was really not in existence. And I think that the potential for the company is huge.
I want to go back to 2023, October 7th, and talk about a date that really shaped Israel. Quickly afterwards, we saw a huge dip in foreign investment and a lot of standstill for the country. But now we're seeing, I would call it a rebound, a strong comeback. How was that experience for you? And in your perspective, what has been happening in Israel for the past year and a half?
I think that if we go to the end point, I think that there is one very significant term, which is resilience. Israelis are accustomed to working under pressure, under very strict or tight terms, and everybody, I would say, immediately understood after a few days. We understood this is a very significant event, and what was will not be anymore. And when it comes to startups, I think that lean and mean is an understatement. It also, from my point of view, the need to focus really quickly on the important things and cut costs, be much more efficient, and in a sense also become a must company and not just a nice to have company. These are things that have been quite prominent. Again, this is what I experienced in my portfolio companies. Again, I directed them to be, on one hand, quite open and let me know how are things and how business is being conducted, if there are any issues. And luckily, there were no real issues in my companies. But also communicate and ask me, as they say, ask me anything. I'm here, and I was there to provide support and guidance. Um, and I don't think that I'm necessarily unique in that way. I would like to think that most venture capital funds in Israel did similar things. Again, what's different in my view, at least in my fund, is the fact that I've been in my CEO's places. I know what it actually means to run a company. And having this perspective, and again, also same as my partners, it gives you added value and gravity when you talk to founders, so they actually listen. And in the end, all of my companies were able to ride the storm, so to speak, continue growing their business, although things have been not easy, to say the least. Raise capital, again, Kappa is only one example. I have other companies that were able to raise capital in very uncertain times. In the end, it makes you much more resolved, if you ask me.
You use the term lean and mean, and that is something different than the few year season we had before the war, where everyone was looking for the next Israeli unicorn companies. What's the shift that's been happening in Israel now, and what's the shift also with founders? How are they adapting to this new reality?
I think that they understand that it's not only growth or hyper growth that is important. It's actually important to build a business, a viable business, not just waste investors' money on expedited growth, on acquiring customers, but actually building viable businesses and focusing on what I mentioned earlier, on the must-haves, not on the nice-to-haves. So this is something that I do sense that has changed. Again, it's all not just fluff. You have to have actual products with actual value that generate revenue. And this is something that was not that apparent necessarily before October 7th. Post October 7th, I think that pretty much all across the board, this notion really sunk in. And I think that's quite relevant, important, I think useful, because if it's not a must to have, then it's not really meant to be, in my point of view. And I think that most startups here learn this lesson. Again, I think this, if you think, let's say, strategically for the next few years, then again, there's also a very interesting burst of innovation post this conflict. A lot of things that started in defense or military technologies that are trickling to civilian markets. This is something which is, again, very significant. There's a huge wave of innovation. Plus, you have very attractive valuations here. So I think that the next few years are going to be quite interesting, so to speak.
Speaking into that, both for investors and for founders, what are things to look for in the next coming few years? And what are some pieces of advice you would give both to founders and to investors?
The fact that AI is really on the rise, this obviously would affect companies very, very significantly. You will have more and more work of programmers that will be done by AI. So you will potentially also expect expedited growth of companies without necessarily raising too much capital. Yes, I would stay very, very tuned to customer needs. Listen to customers. Again, this is always, I think, a good advice. I'm pretty much against companies that are, they're areas of hypes. Again, I won't, there are things like crypto or gaming or things that frankly I don't understand in. I have no experience in or real knowledge of, but I would advise to stay on things that have tangible value. And as let's say the startup founder, always think of how you can generate value to your customers from day one, not stay, I don't know, 1 or 2 years, work on something and then go out and understand that, hey, there is no market for that. This is a solution looking for a problem. No, always look at the market. This is something that many founders do have this strong notion. They think that they know the market, but they don't actually know it. They go and develop something, raise capital, and in the end, they find themselves with a solution that nobody really needs. So good research and talking to customers is something which is imperative. Again, be the must-have company. That's one thing. Always also think that about problems that are not immediate problems, but the real problems that will be in, let's say, 2 or 3 years. Again, if you're just going to found a startup, because if you're trying to solve today's problem, you're not going to be relevant. You have to be ambitious enough and have the guts to think of, hey, I think that this is going to be the next big challenge. Then start your company and hopefully be the one that solves the problem of few years from now. Then again, this is my point of view, and obviously, not less important, the chemistry and the ability to work between founders is something which is really, really imperative. In the end, the human factor is highly, highly significant. I'm not the only investor that looks at founders and see how they interact with each other, the ability to work with each other. Again, as let's say if you're a startup founder, you will probably spend most of your days, I will say nights as well, with your partners, not with your family. You have to have very good interactions, understand each other, be forgiving to each other. Because in the end, it does rely on the team. It is what it is. We're not machines yet. And the ability to work as a team is really imperative. So this is something that I also look at quite significantly.
People outside of Israel who are seeing that there are a lot of things on the rise right now, how can they plug into what's happening in the country?
That's obviously from my own personal perspective, investing like in funds like my fund, that provides them a conduit to what's happening in the local ecosystem. Again, Israel is, I would assume, one of the two major hubs of high tech globally. You have the Silicon Valley and you have Israel. In Israel, it is a small place of 10 million people, but you have technologies here. It's like it was once told to me like by one of my investors, a non-Israeli one. Israel is like a candy store or a supermarket of technologies. You have pretty much everything here. So potentially having access to people that want to have access to what's happening here, I think that potentially investing in funds like mine or others, this is one good way of getting exposure to what's happening here. I wouldn't necessarily say read the papers, because there's a lot of misconception. And when you come to Israel and Tel Aviv, and I've had this dozens of times from both customers in my previous lifetime and investors, when they come to Israel and they see things in their own eyes, a lot of things change in their perception, because what you read in the papers and see in the news is quite different than reality in itself. So there's never, I think, a substitute for a personal touch. So I do think it's always, people are more than welcome here. Israelis are warm and welcoming. So I think in Israel, anyway, there's a lot to see here. Not only the technology, but also a lot of art, history, and you name it. The food is also great. The weather is great. So I always advise people to come over.
Right, I agree. Wrapping up with the last question. You're doing some very exciting work. Where do you see it going in the next 5 years, and where would you hope to be with your fund?
Hopefully, I will have been after a few exits. Beyond that, I do foresee IL Ventures becoming a hub, I would say, with few funds, promoting, again, Israeli innovation to things that are quite in need in a global scale. So I would like to scale up, make much more investments, create additional value and partnerships, both here locally and globally. This is where I see myself. Anyway, venture capital is a very long-term play. But I think that the opportunity is really amazing. Also, when you look at what's happening globally, I think that in the next 10, 20 years, I think that the things that we're doing are going to be quite significant. Plus, frankly speaking, if you think also strategically at what's happening in the region here, Israel is currently in probably the best situation geostrategically that it has been in a very long time. So a lot of the security potential threats that were there are no longer there. And there's a tidal shift in the Middle East, and I think that in the end, the pendulum is in a very positive direction towards Israel. Plus, there is a very common, I would say, knowledge that a lot of times after conflicts, significant conflicts, when things go down, after that, there's a huge rise in the economy. And potentially, if we think forward and things that I hope would happen, like the potential Saudi deal, then things could change here even more towards very good, positive direction. So I think if you ask me, yesterday I heard Sean McGuire from Sequoia that just reopened their activity here after a decade. Now is the best time to invest in Israel. I'm not the only ones, or he's not the only one saying that. Me as well. You have Google that bought Wiz for $32 billion. You have Jensen Huang from NVIDIA doubling down on Israel. You have very significant global investors really coming here. A lot of foreign investments are flowing because, again, smart investors understand that this is actually the best time to be here. So I'm a complete believer in that.
That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening. For more about IL Ventures, visit il-ventures.com. And for more about Omec, visit omec.io. Make sure to subscribe.